Charlie Sheen shocker. Tonight, the actor's stunning statements on 9/11.
Yeah,
Is covering it
that's
all.
what they want you to think.
What's the truth?
The more you look at stuff, especially specific incidents, specific events in or around the fateful day, it just raises a lot of questions.
Charlie Sheen has his own questions about 9/11, and Showbiz Tonight has obtained the
conspiracy theorists on this particular issue. You know, it seems to me like 19 amateurs with box cutters taking over 4 commercial airliners and hitting 75% of their targets. That feels like a conspiracy theory.
I do believe that it is the first time in history that fire has ever melted steel. I do believe that it defies physics for the World Trade Center Tower 7, Building 7, which collapsed in on itself. It is impossible for a building to fall the way it fell without explosives being involved. World Trade Center 7. World Trader 1 and 2 got hit by planes. 7, miraculously, the first time in history, steel was melted by fire. It is physically impossible.
And who do you think is responsible for that?
I have no idea. But to say that we don't know that it imploded and it was an implosion and a demolition is beyond ignorant. Look at the films, get a physics expert here from Yale, from Harvard, pick the school. It defies reason.
Let's get one. Let's get one, because that
I would do it.
Is the unthinkable.
It is.
The building was designed to have a fully loaded 707 crash into it. That was the largest plane at the time. I believe that the building probably could sustain multiple impacts of jetliners because this structure is like the mosquito netting on your screen door, this intense grid, and the jet plane is just a pencil puncturing that screen netting. It really does nothing to the screen netting.
It was very much like a controlled demolition when you look at it, because the building essentially fell almost vertically down, as if someone had deliberately set blasts to take place to cause the building to fall vertically downward.
A light-colored dust detonation zone quickly progresses down the side of the tower while the corner structure remains intact.
Later that afternoon, another building at the World Trade Center site collapsed. This time, without a plane ever hitting it. This is Building 7, in the shadow of the Twin Towers. Its collapse was captured on camera from several angles. The building had been evacuated and there were no casualties. With so much else going on that day, the event was barely reported.
World Trade Center Building 7 was brought down in a controlled demolition. There's no other way to look at it.
The motive, it's argued, is that there was a secret command bunker in Building 7 from where the attacks were coordinated. It had to be demolished to hide the evidence. The Secret Service, Pentagon, and the CIA all had offices there. And there was a New York City command center on the 23rd floor on standby for civil emergencies. These are other buildings which were brought down by demolition charges. The collapse of Building 7 here looks similar.
We're standing here north of Ground Zero in the original footprint of World Trade Center 7, which is this dark building, and we're on the eastern corner here. The South Tower stood directly behind us in front of where that black building is now, and the North Tower was a little bit around the corner there. Here on this video, you can actually see what happens. This is looking directly south at where we're standing now. We're down here.
But it does look exactly like a controlled demolition.
I understand why people might think that, and I see what they're saying, but when you learn the facts about the way that the building was built and about the way that it supported itself and the damage that was done from the collapsing towers that preceded it, the idea that it was a demolition just holds no water.
The trusses in the building made it very asymmetrical. There were 24 central columns, steel columns. And for those to fail in such a way that that building would collapse in the center first and then come straight down, instead of toppling over, for instance, no.
The entire roofline cascades downward neatly into its own footprint. The NAST chart of the damages shows a substantial gouge in the south face from the 10th floor to the ground, affecting 3 of the structural columns. Here begin the problems in the NIST preliminary report on the collapse of World Trade Center 7. The first column to collapse is said to be column number 80, which was untouched by the structural damage. This is evident in the fall of the east penthouse, supported by column number 80. This precedes global collapse, but what happens next is not so easily explained. The building does not fall over in the direction of the gouging damage, and it does not fall over in the direction of the failed column beneath the east penthouse. Now, it is one thing to dispute the controlled demolition hypothesis. It is another to pretend that these pictures do not suggest it at all.
No going back to the era before September the 11th, 2001, to false comfort in a dangerous world.
In the interview, Sheen says he wondered if the buildings could have been brought down by a deliberate, yes, deliberate implosion.
I saw the South Tower hit live. That famous wide shot where it disappears behind the building, and then we see the tremendous fireball. And there was just a feeling that it just didn't look, how do I say this? Didn't look like any commercial jetliner I've flown on any time in my life. And then when the buildings came down, later on that day, I was with my brother, and I said, hey, call me insane, but did it sort of look like those buildings came down in a controlled demolition?
These core columns were discovered after the collapse. The angled cut occurs in exactly the manner that shaped charges slice through steel beams to control the way they fall. Notice the hardened, once liquid metal. Was thermite used with the shaped charge?
The job of the shaped charge is to cut steel H-beams.
The way we do this is by cutting the beam at an angle, which through a series of beams cut at the same angle will tend to make the building shift over and walk.
Sheen is also questioning how a commercial airliner could have hit the Pentagon.
Show us this incredible maneuvering. Just show it to us. Just show us, how this particular plane pulled off these maneuvers. What was it, a 270-degree turn at 500 miles an hour, descending 7,000 feet in 2.5 minutes, skimming across the treetops, the last 500 meters, 4 feet off the ground.
67 times in the year before 9/11/01, planes were off course, and fighter jets responded. So where were the fighter jets on 9/11? It's more than incompetence, it's criminal.
For some mysterious reason that day, everything broke on the communication between the FAA and NORAD, and then NORAD responded very slowly, and then the fighter pilots responded very slowly, and you had all of these coincidences of great incompetence that day. The conspiracy theory is that it was stand down. If a stand down order were given, it probably would have to come from at least as high as the vice president.
Less than 3 miles from where the towers once stood, clues to their collapse lie in gigantic, twisted heaps in this New Jersey scrapyard. Time is short. The piles of high-strength steel evidence are being cut into chunks for export to recycling plants in the Far East. The deals with the scrap merchants have already been made.